everybody. My name is Mathew Owens, and welcome to Masters of Real Estate. Today, I have a unique guest on the line, Tom Dunkel, that focuses all about self-storage. He's a good friend of mine. We've actually been in multiple masterminds together, spoken on stages together. This dude knows his stuff when it comes to self-storage, investing in syndications, raising capital, helping mitigate risk. And this is one of the reasons why I really like talking to specific guests with specific experience types, because you get different perspectives of the way they mitigate risk, how they structure their deals, different asset classes that, I've invested multiple times in self-storage, but I've never come out to my database with self-storage type deals. And I'm looking to learn as much as I can about that space too, and kind of his background. So welcome very much. Thank you very much, Tom, for coming. Welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about your background, man. How'd you get started in all this?
Sure.
And what'd you do before real estate, and how'd you get to where you are today, man?
Wow, that's a big question, Matthew. But hey, man, it's great to see you. It's great to be with you and all the listeners today. Looking forward to our chat very much. But yeah, man, I've been around a little bit. I'll go back. I won't go all the way back because I'm solidly in my 50s now. So I tend to get very long.
You were 5 years old,
That's
so.
right. Yeah, exactly. But no, I graduated from business school, went into doing mergers and acquisitions and corporate finance stuff in the aerospace industry, which was an amazing experience because the company had been acquired by this management team that was led by a really high-powered Harvard MBA, Harvard undergrad, first Boston investment banking guy. He brought in some amazing people. Ex-fighter pilots, there were astronauts like on our board of directors, and so it's just such a high caliber kind of environment. Wharton MBAs, Chicago MBA. I mean, just a great environment for me to really learn the nuts and bolts of corporate finance and doing deals. So I've been doing deals for a long time. That was 95 when I got out of business school. So going on 30 years, man.
Nice.
It's like poof, gone really quick. But, just kind of continued to build on that learning experience, Matthew, as I went to a few other jobs along the way. But I always had sort of this gut feeling like, I just wasn't cut out for corporate life. I'm not like a, climb the ladder and play the politics kind of guy. Like I wanted to go out and do my own thing. So, it's always tough, like, to make that call. Like, when do you leave the cushy corporate job? Because, I had pretty solid career. I was making good money, golden handcuffs, all that stuff. So it was hard to just say, hey, I'm going to leave, or I'm going to do something on the side, because of course, I'm working long hours. I got young kids at home. So, in April of 2006, my decision was made for me when I got fired from my job. And so it was like, oh, okay, I guess this is when I'm supposed to start my entrepreneurial career. So, so April 2006, I found myself out of a job, but the good news was I was a VP at the company, so I left with a pretty decent package that gave me some dry powder to kind of go and launch my entrepreneurial career. And I had always been kind of interested in real estate, and so got into real estate 2006. Really bad timing, of course, in 2020 hindsight. So my big war chest that I built up, basically, got torched those next few years as I learned some hard lessons getting into, fix and flips and residential, and picking up some rental properties, doing some wholesaling, that sort of thing. And it just, I'm spending a ton of money on marketing, and the money's going out the door like crazy. Yeah. And it's not coming back in the door.
Right.
So around about like 2009, I started learning about distressed mortgage debt. And of course, for those listening, the way to really learn is, like Mathew mentioned in the beginning, we're in some mastermind groups together. But go into your local real estate investor meetup. Like, you're going to meet some interesting people. And so it was through that process that I started learning about distressed mortgage debt. Started buying some loans in 2009, 2010. I hooked up with my partner, Joe Downs, and we started a company that's known today as U.S. Mortgage Resolution. And in that distressed mortgage debt business, we generated over $57 million of revenue over that 14-year time period. And it's
Amazing.
it's been just a great asset class, but it's also a very volatile asset class. It's tough to predict. And so for an MBA guy like me, I'm trying to do like the business plan and come up with the key performance indicators, the KPIs and all that stuff. And we just couldn't really do it in our distressed mortgage debt business because it's so heavily driven by the banks and when they're wanting to sell. And
Right.
so we were looking around for another asset class that could help to smooth out the volatility of the distressed mortgage debt business. So we started doing some hard money lending. We didn't do too well at that. So we actually went back to doing some residential fix and flips. That did not go well. Got involved in a title company. That did not go well. What else did we do that failed? I think, we tried hard money lending again and it failed because we didn't learn our lesson the first time. But, around about 2017, we started learning about self-storage, started hearing a little bit more about it, about how it's a resilient asset class. And actually at the time, too, we were looking at multifamily, but the multifamily cap rates were already getting really, really, really compressed. And so as we started looking at deals in self-storage, we're like, hey, these numbers actually work a lot better. So we started going to the conferences, joined a mastermind group, and learned about self-storage. And so, now here we are, a few years later, we've acquired 18 facilities across 8 states.
It's awesome.
About $50 million worth of acquisition value, about 4,000 units, give or take. And we built up a great team. We've got a pretty solid track record going, even though we've got some challenges these days. I'm sure we can get into that a little bit later. But that's kind of as short as I could make it, Matthew.
That's awesome.
My story about how I got here as Chief Investment Officer at Belrose Storage Group.
I think there's some key takeaways from what you just mentioned there. And, one of the biggest things that I think a lot of investors don't realize in the beginning, they think, hey, I got to be a fix and flipper, or I have to go and do a specific strategy. Many times, as you learn the ropes on that, you're going to take hits, and you're going to go, and you're going to fail for a period of time, or have temporary defeat. I like to change the wording a little bit, but and you're building those blocks of resilience across the board. I go through things. Everyone, every single real estate investor on the planet has gone through things. I quit my CPA firm job in 2006. I probably should have been fired 2 weeks before because my mind was gone and I'm like focused on real estate and not giving a crap anymore about auditing. You know what I mean? So but at the end of the day, I quit in 2006 too, and then literally lost everything in like 2008, 2009 when everything crashed, and my ego was destroyed. But it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me because I was able to stand back up. And when you can stand back up and keep moving forward and find the solution and push through those trials and tribulations, that's when the success really happens at the end of the day. And you're going to go through shifts because sometimes you go through these cycles where things change in a market. It becomes very hard to fix and flip, or very hard to invest in multifamily or invest in notes, and you need to shift to a different strategy dependent on what the market is at the time. And so you have another learning curve to start a new income stream that you deal with. I did the same thing on the hard money lending side, lending to the wrong borrowers, not knowing my due diligence up front correctly, all of those little things, and not having the right processes and procedures on the back end. And it bit me in the butt really good too, where I took hits myself and continue to pay my investors continuously to make sure they're cool. But you take those hits on each asset class that you focus on, and there's some negatives to these asset classes also, right? Like you said on the fix and flipping, that's a hell of a lot of marketing, and it's cutthroat. You need to be at the property like same day, same couple days to get that deal under contract, do your renovation scope right there at the property, sign a contract right there at the time, and you're spending, we're spending like $100,000 plus a year on marketing, 150,000 on direct mail, pay by click, and you better have a good system, a sales system, a marketing system, a acquisition system, have the capital on deck, because you don't want to pay all this money and not be able to take take it down. And so there's so many things to go wrong, especially same thing with the lending space. Me as a construction lender, we're construction managers and we're property managers doing collections and making sure the construction management is done right? So, and that's what I really like about like projects like self-storage or multifamily or mobile homes, is that especially self-storage and mobile homes, because they are much more recession resistant. There's a lot of additional asset valuation I'll say asset value strategies, that your valuation strategy you can increase the value with over even multifamily as well, because of the other income streams attributable to that, and we'll get into that for sure. But I think, you know, learning where your highest and best use of your time and the least amount of stress and headache is in the industry is key, based on your skill sets and resources. And so you're going to go through that as a new investor or as a passive investor. If you're trying to do that, you want to pick the right, you know, teams that have the right operational efficiencies. So I'm super excited to dive in a little bit about the self-storage stuff. What are the specific primary benefits you see as self-storage over other asset classes like fix and flipping or even multifamilies out there as well? Because you know, comparatively.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that we like about self-storage, that we love about self-storage. I would say probably the three things I typically start with is number one, it's a great capital preservation vehicle, because, you know, right now, Mathew, you know, we're in there battling every day trying to do these deals, but it's tough right now. You know, interest rates have been skyrocketing. You know, when the market's been challenging to acquire facilities and other assets at fair valuations. And so when you look at loan defaults in commercial real estate, different asset classes, right? You know, you've got hospitality is always pretty high. You know, retail is pretty high because, you know, Amazon, the internet's wiping out retail. And then, you know, and then these days, right, post-COVID, you've got office is defaulting at a very high rate, right? And then there's, you know, pretty good drop-off. You get to multifamily, and then self-storage, it doesn't even show up on the chart.
It's awesome.
It just does not default. So as an investor myself now for, you know, over 18 years, like, that really makes me feel pretty good about, you know, at least my money's going to be well preserved. Like, you know, I feel like today is a time where, you know, you're kind of placing some chips on the roulette table, you know, and you know, you got to wait, you know, to see what happens down the road. And then, you know, you can collect your big winnings, I think, if you're patient, right? And so having that capital preservation just helps me as an investor, and our investors, you know, sleep well at night.
Absolutely.
The other cool thing about storage is for 40 years, over 40 years, the average occupancy rate at self-storage facilities around the country has kind of gently meandered between about 80 and 90%.
Okay.
So what does that tell you? I mean, if you think about like all the things that have happened over the last 40
years,
there's a demand,
Mathew, no matter what, right?
Yeah. So, you know, we've been through COVID, we've been through the, you know, internet bubble burst, you know, wars, and, you know, the big run-ups, and the, you know, so we've had all these different economies over that time span, but self-storage just kind of stays pretty steady, constant. And it's because, you know, when things are going good, right? People are buying stuff. They're buying new houses, and all of those things are demand drivers for storage. And then when things are bad, right, people are moving, they're going through a divorce, they're going through some challenge in their life, and they need a place to store stuff. So that's why it's a pretty resilient asset class. So it's like, Mathew, you've got kids, right? So, you know, have you been to the water park? You know, they have those rides now, or those slides now, where, you know, the floor drops out from underneath you, and you get water up your nose and like in your eyes, and it's like and you get to the bottom and you got a huge wedgie, right? To me, that's like a lot of different. That's like the more riskier kinds of real estate investing. You won't find me there.
I like the analogy.
You'll find me on the lazy river that goes like around the outside of the water park, you know, with my cocktail, my sunglasses, holding hands with my loved one. I mean, that's self-storage, right? Because it's just that calm and steady.
Right.
The other thing, the last thing that I'll throw out for right now, and we can get more stuff later, is market penetration. What is that? That just means, you know, people using storage. That number is increasing it's becoming more and more adopted as just a normal kind of consumer type thing. So, a few years back, it was maybe 7-8% of households were using storage. These days, it's going on maybe about 12% or more.
Interesting.
And it doesn't, maybe going from 7 to 12 doesn't sound like a lot, but when you consider there's 1.2 million households, or sorry, 120 million households in the country. Every 1% move is 1.2 million new self-storage customers. So that 5% move is, like 6 million,
Huge.
Right. New customers. And self-storage is not being built fast enough to keep up with that demand. So that's another reason why the occupancy stays high, and it gives us the ability to increase our rates. So those are a few of our highlights. Is the
I really
highlights.
like, from an economic stability standpoint and understanding where we are in the market right now, and potential recessions and things like that. We could very well be in one right now, and looking at this, self-storage and mobile home parks usually perform better during recessionary climates when there's more distress, because there's more people moving, and with this consumerism society and inflation going up consistently as well, you still have people that have a lot of stuff, but they need to downsize. Housing is the most expensive expensive thing on the planet for people right now is their housing. And so going through and investing in an environment where you actually do better during recessionary climates many times because of that additional demand is really an interesting play. Now, obviously, we've had some outside factors that have occurred, right? The interest rate environment and stuff like that. And so a lot of that comes down to initial structuring. And I don't think the reason why it's hard, I think the reason why it's hard to find projects right now is that there's always a period of time between any major shift in the market where the sellers still think their price is here, and the buyers are saying it doesn't pencil. Here's the real numbers right now in order for me to hit my metrics. And you have to have a little bit better metrics because you have to contemplate for potential additional downside risk of the market on top of that gap that already exists. So unless you're having distress up here, then then you're not going to get them necessarily to listen to what the real need is from the buyer, right? So it becomes harder to buy, right? Now, on the other side of things too, you have you have a situation where interest rates are still crazy high, and they could go higher. I don't know that that'll happen, given what we're seeing is the written inflation rate and stuff like that is lower than what what it really is, but it's coming down, right? And from that perspective, they may adjust rates, and then I think there may be still a lot of distress coming. If they adjust rates, it'll help that distress that may be coming. But I read a stat the other day, and I don't know, it was just from an article. I didn't back this up, but read it in an article that said that 70% of all bridge lending is coming due in the next 3 years, and so. That is a scary stat right there, because that means that there could be potentially a lot of distress if they can't refinance those bridge loans and can't raise the capital because the numbers don't work on their penciled approach that they did pre-interest rate increase, right? And so so that's going to be a big issue. You see a lot of people holding their principal back or holding distributions because they might need to refinance and put more cash in, and they're trying to preserve capital. So there's it's a smart thing to do, of course, when that occurs. From an investor perspective, you're not getting your return, but you got to know that your capital is being preserved, and that's the reason for doing it when there was a major change in the market, right? We're seeing this across the board, most asset classes right now, even down to the single families. It's difficult because you might have a market value at 6 cap, but rates are 6.5 to 7.5 depending on the borrower, the seller, who the lender is. So does this all make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, we were just having a discussion internally here because, of course, we're still active in the marketplace, and we're trying to, structure our capital stack in the most
effective way,
prudent and effective way that we can. So, we're having those discussions ongoing. But a quick little story around that. So it sounds like you and I had similar experiences in the Great Recession. So we still have those battle scars, right? So a little over a year ago, we acquired a facility out in Kentucky And this small local lender, which is who we're typically dealing with, they said, hey, we really like what you guys are doing. We'll give you an 80% loan to value loan. And at the
Awesome.
time, we were like, hey, thanks, but
Yeah.
you know what? Our numbers work really well at 75% loan to value, so we're not going to take that much leverage. Appreciate it. We're going to
Yeah.
stick to 75, and thankfully, it's a good thing we did that, right? Because then the market started to change. Interest rates ran up. Rental rates at facilities across the country started coming down. Occupancy started coming down. So, we're bumping along with that facility right now as we're just sort of absorbing that and kind of getting ready for the curve to kind of hit at that inflection point. But had we taken on that 80%, when the skies were blue and the flowers were blooming and the birds were chirping, we might be in a little different scenario right now. So I think having a sponsor, an experienced sponsor, that's been through the Great Recession, is really important.
Right.
And so I encourage our investors, to, of course, not only look at Belrose Storage Group deals, but when you're looking at other deals, don't just go straight to the deal and start looking at the asset or the numbers or whatever. Spend some time getting to know your sponsor and what have they been through? What's their experience?
I think that's super important to understand. Hey, how risk adverse is that sponsor? Are they focused and realizing all the risks that are potentially out there? And what are their answers to those questions when it comes to risk mitigation? Are they giving you a, slap on the wrist, here you go, get out of here type answer that's fluff? Or are they really trying to be sincere and explain to you their real thinking behind why their metrics are the way they are and why they're not as concerned about that particular risk? Because there's a ton of risks out there, and not everybody has the same understanding of that risk. They have different experiences that we may not have yet. And what I've found is that as an operator, I can learn a lot from my investors just because they'll tell me certain things that I'm like, I didn't think about that. That was great. I want to write that down and put it into my 200-point due diligence checklist. You know what I mean? So and do that whole thing, right? And I think that's important from a sponsor, is to have a sponsor that is not egocentric, that isn't focused on I know everything type mentality. You're looking at who are you doing business with long term, and how much do they give a crap about investors' money. So and that shows in the risk mitigation techniques that you try to deploy.
Yep, 100%.
So when you went through this environment, right, in the beginning, how are you, you're seeing the new changes in the rates, you're seeing the new financial projections moving forward. What are you focused on moving forward as far as acquisition goes, loan, cost to value or cost to improved value, as well as, the length of the loan, and how are you mitigating risk moving forward, and what are you trying to focus on buying right now that pencils? And what does penciling mean, right? Like what is it? What is a good deal?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't a huge surprise, right, when all that inflation came along and those interest rates started going through the roof. I mean, we had just come out of the pandemic, right, and the money was being printed like crazy.
Insane.
So it wasn't a big surprise that happened. So it was back then that we started adjusting our underwriting assumptions. So
because if they're printing money, that means inflation. That means the Fed's only tool is to increase rates to stop inflation. I wish I would have thought about that beforehand, but at the same time, a lot of people do. So
sure. Yeah, and look, I don't know that anyone predicted interest rates were going to go up 500 basis points.
Yeah, it was a big,
and all the ancillary, ripple effects. We hadn't really been through anything quite like that. So we did our best to just really kind of temper our projections and our expectations, and we were very candid with our investors, like, hey, we just came out of this nice run up, we had a lot of wind at our backs, during COVID. Self-storage was extremely profitable during that time period. Demand was really pushing, but now that's over, and we're kind of back to the real seasonality of self-storage, and there's still just some things that need some things that need to make their way through the snake, that And
Right.
so, we try to temper expectations for our investors. We tempered our expectations for exit values when we're calculating our, doing our discounted cash flows and our return expectations and that sort of thing. But it's still challenging because as you're doing that, you're still in a competitive market, and there are operators and buyers out there that weren't adjusting, like we were. So we found ourselves. I think we probably in 2023. I think we looked at probably 300 deals, maybe 400 deals, and we bought 3.
That's a crazy amount of number of deals to review,
Yeah.
man. To find 3 of them, but
Yeah,
if you
but
find
we had
if you
to.
find 3, that's great. So
Yeah, and so a lot of those were seller financed, so that was a big help because when you do a seller finance deal, a lot of times that's going to be interest only, so it's not as damaging or it's not as much of a burden to your cash flow. So you still have some cash, hopefully,
it
to
helps
pay a
because you're
little
not
pref
dealing
to
with
your
the current
investors.
debt, right?
Exactly.
You might already have long-term debt in place. You don't have to worry about changes in rates during closing and all that kind of stuff that could blow up a deal.
Yeah,
all that
totally,
stuff.
totally. Yeah,
I think also, some of the things that we look at on our side is when we're trying to mitigate the downside risk of a market is sometimes we'll do heavier value adds so that our cost to the value of that asset is even less because it's a heavier lift up front. You're usually getting it as a bigger discount to give us that equity protection in case the market drops in the meantime.
Yeah.
In addition, adding your refinance rate, increasing that rate if you're going to refinance on short-term debt or something like that, or even in 5 years a refinance, increase that rate because it could go up, lowering the cap rate on exit just like you did. Those things are key to show real potential numbers. You could show people this is if nothing changes, but also develop your projections based on this is what based on our expectation and potential risks that are coming up in our conservative approach to this. That's super important from an investor perspective,
That's right. Yeah, and hopefully, investors are wise enough to see that, hey, our projections are tempered. We're using our experience from the past to do, and there are new operators. They're going to be promising you the moon, Mr. Investor, but you really want to take a little closer look at how are they coming up with those projections? Have they what are they based on? Is it just kind of wishful thinking, or they have actual data that are supporting that? So we definitely lost out on some deals. We definitely had investors say, hey, I don't think your returns are high enough compared to this other thing I'm looking at, and so we lost some deals, we lost some investors, or at least we had investors kind of divert to other places. But we had to stick by our values and by our underwriting and take the lumps. But thankfully we have even though we have some facilities that are they're having a tough time right now, like a lot of facilities, we don't have any that are like in really super challenging places.
I think investors need to realize. I think investors need to realize that when they are investing, it's not all about the return. So I'll give you an example. Like you might have a 8 to 9%. Or 12% first position trust deed against a property that is 65% of the value of that asset, right? You might be investing in that. Maybe investors are getting, 9% or 8% on their money or whatever return that is. There's other companies and funds out there that will pay you 12, 15% on your money, but they are leveraging that loan. They are borrowing money from a bank against that loan, and you are now in second position to that bank's money, which then gives that leverage to where they can make 24 or 50% plus returns on the investor capital and pay the investors 15 or 12 or whatever return that is at a higher rate than what I would be paying, but I don't leverage and investors are all in first position. So those types of differences are significantly different risks. And so understanding those is key. And unfortunately, a lot of investors don't look at that level. They just see, wow, 12% more. Great, I'm at it. And it's understandable from an emotional perspective, but most people don't understand how to mitigate risk. And so I urge all investors to make sure you're mitigating that risk and understanding the risk differences between investments, because you could be way more conservative than that other guy. I've seen things where people are increasing rents by 5% a year and expenses increases by 2% a year, which is probably going to be, way below, the opposite, tenfold, so
Yeah.
expenses could be going up 10 and rents could drop. At what point where's break even, so
right. That's
being very careful is key, I think.
Risk-adjusted returns, Matthew, right?
Yes.
That's what they need to focus on. Yep.
Exactly.
Totally.
And what kind of deals are you what are you focused on now? Like, what does a good deal look like to you now from an investor perspective? Like, what are you targeting for investor returns, with the IRR on the back end, and what makes sense for this to pencil from, a new project standpoint?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll take that opportunity that you've given me here to tell you about two niches within the self-storage niche that we're really excited about and going after. And it's because, Matthew, because these are areas where the deals are penciling out much better as compared to traditional drive-up self-storage where your customer's getting a 10 by 10. And we're still doing that. We still love that business, but there are two niches. One is, we call it pro storage, or some others call it contractor storage. So these are, instead of a 10 by 10 with an 8-foot roll-up door, these are 18 by 25 or larger units with a 14-foot roll-up door, maybe a 20-foot ceiling. And so this is the kind of unit where a contractor who has a van or a truck, or they can pull it right in there if they have enough space to keep their materials and their expensive equipment, and they can essentially run their business out of this self-storage unit. So think about landscapers, carpenters, plumbers, electricians. These are hardworking people that are needing this kind of space because they've probably outgrown. Or their wife kicked them out of the garage at home, but they're too small for like a big, maybe 15 or 30,000 square foot flex space, right? So there's a lot of these, kind of mom and pop onesie twosie contractors out there that need this type of space. And by the way, those 15,000, 30,000 square foot flex spaces, they're all being consumed by the last mile distributors like Amazon, and the rest of those guys are just gobbling up those spaces and pumping up the price, the rental price on those, and they're pricing these smaller contractors out of those spaces. So there's leaving this gap, right? And so contractors are loving this type of product. We have a facility in North Carolina that, when we bought it about a year ago, the rates for like an 18 by 25 are about $450 a month. We now are charging $900 a month for that because we're just riding the supply and demand curve, Matthew, right? It's like there's huge demand for this type of product, but there's just not a lot of this type of product in the marketplace. So we're able to work that supply demand curve to push up those rates. And when a unit does go vacant, it gets filled within about a week, which is great.
That's awesome.
So
that's
we're
a great strategy.
Looking for a lot more of that type of facility. They're hard to find, so we're actually looking at starting to build some of those. But that's a huge niche that we're excited about. The other one is boat and RV storage. So this is an area too where there's just a big supply and demand imbalance. There's like 400,000 RVs are built every year, but only 20,000 new parking places come online every year. And so you have these homeowners associations, right, that are popping up with all these new developments that are needing to be built to support the population growth. Increase. And HOAs, they don't want the boat or the RV in the parking lot or in the yard in their nice new development. So they're saying, hey, you can't park it there. So we have customers at some of our facilities where we have boat and RV parking. They'll drive an hour to get to our facility because they just can't find anything closer. And the other thing they do, Matthew, is if they do take their RV out, let's say they go on the road for the summer for like 2 or 3 months or whatever, they keep paying for their spot because they don't want to lose it.
Right.
Even though they're not there.
this is a big problem in my area in Southern California. You know,
Totally.
I was actually looking at RV places to park, and they're out in like Palm Springs area, which is like 2 hours away from me to find those spots. And so, because the land is so expensive, you know,
Yes,
and it makes a lot of sense to be able to build these types of things. And, you know, if they're air conditioned, so this stuff doesn't get ruined inside and stuff like
that's
that
right.
as well, especially
Yep.
if you're in Palm Springs with 115-degree heat, you know. So, but I
Yeah,
mean, these types of things can be
yeah,
extremely profitable, very low
that's right.
maintenance. What do you need? One guy on site
Yeah,
max, you know,
yeah,
during that time.
yeah, not
So,
even.
and
Yeah,
yeah, and it's like, it's get an appointment and you can pick up your stuff, you know, and then I'll send somebody, you know.
that's right.
So, I mean, the cost structure of that is significantly reduced. And then there's a lot of
That's right.
upsell potential as well, right? Like, I know that a lot of the self-storage, they might, you know, contract with U-Haul and make a revenue stream. They sell boxes and supplies and other things like that. What other income streams am I not thinking about
Yeah, tenant
on the
protection.
self? Okay, there you go. So like
Yep.
insurance basically for the tenants in those cases. So
Yep.
there's a lot of little things you can make money off of. I've even thought about putting my investment stuff out there and being like, here you go, and my short-term rentals and, you know, different, you know, stuff there to try to
Yeah,
increase revenue. But
that's right.
very interesting stuff. I really love self-storage. I think it's a great asset class to focus on. Obviously, the numbers got a pencil across the board. But how can people reach you, Tom, if they want to get a hold of you to learn more about self-storage or get educated more
Yeah.
to be able to, you know, be able to make an investment in the first place, right?
Totally, yeah, yeah, Matthew, this has been great, buddy. I love your energy. You got a lot of great questions. But yeah, I'm Tom Dunkel. I'm the Chief Investment Officer here at Belrose Storage Group. You can find us on the web at belrosestorategroup.com. And I would encourage investors out there to head to our website because we have a free resource there. We call it the Safe Investing Checklist. And SAFE is an acronym. Of course, investing isn't safe, but if you use the SAFE method, you can probably, hopefully, save yourself some headaches. So just real quick, Matthew, SAFE is an
Please.
acronym, SAFE. S stands for sponsor. Remember a few minutes ago I talked about how it's so important to get to know your sponsor. So it gives you a list of questions, certainly not exhaustive, but just to get your mind going the right direction.
Right.
Questions you should be asking your sponsor. And then A is for asset. What is the asset that you're investing in? Is it, you know, is it a marijuana farm? Is it a RV park? Is it a self-storage facility? You know, and just understand that asset the best as you can so that you can explain it to your kids or your mother or somebody, right?
Right.
And then F is for financials. You know, what are the financial characteristics of this deal? What do the projections look like? What do the returns look like? What are the tax implications? You know, those kinds of questions. And then E finally is for exit. How do you get out of this thing? It's not like you can go to schwab.com and click and sell your position in a Belrose self-storage group deal.
Right.
It just doesn't work that way. So as an investor, you need to understand, okay, what has to happen for this exit? You know, when does that happen? Who's in charge of that? You know, can I get out early? You know, all those kinds of questions. So
Right.
it's a free resource at belrosestorategroup.com. I hope everyone goes out there and jumps on that opportunity.
That's absolutely awesome. So sponsor, asset, financials, exit. So that is a great acronym. I love it. It's probably the most important things you could be thinking about as an investment. I also have a 200-point due diligence checklist that I go through on that's on my website on MathewOwens.com if anybody wants that. And the reason I have so much energy is because I get to talk about real estate all day. And you know, I tell my wife, I say, hey, you know, she doesn't let me talk about it too much, and she tells me, hey, you know, I love what you do, honey, but for some reason you put me to sleep when you talk about it. So you know, I'm trying my hardest to, you know, to give her energy at it too, but you know, it's not the same when you get to talk with someone that has the same interest. So thank you guys so much. Feel free to reach out if you guys have any questions to Tom or myself, and we'd be glad to help you guys out. So talk to you guys soon and have a good rest of the day. Do you want to learn how to create financial freedom in your life through real estate and take your investing business to the next level? If so, you can follow us in one of the following ways. First, you can take one of our free webinars on how to analyze property, how to raise capital for real estate, and how to market and find deals. Three of the key pillars to becoming a successful real estate investor. Number two, you can join us on our mailing list where you'll get tips and tricks on real estate investing directly to your inbox. And number three, you can take our 6-month real estate course that teaches you every aspect of real estate investing you can think of, and more importantly, create financial freedom in your life through real estate investing strategies that I teach. If you want a master's in real estate in 6 months, this course is for you. We're going to go over how to raise money, promissory notes, syndications, fixing and flipping, buy and hold investing, tax and legal structures, self-directed retirement accounts, financial education, how to run a business, how to market and find your deals, and most importantly, how to create that financial freedom in your life so that you can stop trading your time for money and create passive real estate cash flow that you can live off of. If you're interested, go ahead and click on one of the links below, and I look forward to seeing you guys on the other side.